Okay, so we're going to begin where we left off. Parashat Shemot was last week's parsha. We're now in Parashat Va'era. However, we looked last week at a fascinating topic, one which is clearly overlooked in the general focus on the Exodus and Moses' role in the Exodus. He is in a situation where he remonstrates with God over a period of days. God tries to get him to agree to become the leader of the Jewish nation, to participate in the Exodus project, and eventually he agrees, and that's where we began last week. I'm going to refer you back to source number one. Source number one is Parashat Shemot, right at the beginning of the book of Exodus, chapter 4, verse 18, Pasuk Yud Chet, and we begin to talk about the period immediately following Moshe Rabbeinu's encounter with God at Horeb, which is the site of Mount Sinai, where later on the Jewish nation would receive the Torah. That's where we are. It's before he goes to Egypt. It's after his encounter with God at the burning bush. And we're just going to briefly read through the Pesukim again. Moses went back to his father-in-law and he said to him, let me go back to my kinsmen in Egypt and see how they are faring. Okay, and Yisro says to Moshe, he says, go in peace, lech l'shalom. So he comes back, having really had this incredible prophetic moment, encounters God, agrees with God eventually that he's going to be the one, and he comes back to his father-in-law and gets permission for him to go together, I guess with his wife and children, it's not mentioned, but to go to rejoin his nation in Eretz Mitzrayim. The next pasuk, Yutet, God says to Moshe, go back to Egypt, for all the men who sought to kill you are dead. So it seems he didn't go back immediately. He got permission, but he hadn't gone back yet, and needs a bit of a prompt. Okay, God prompts him and says, go back, and in case, by the way, that you're nervous that there's people who are going to kill you, don't concern yourself about that. They're not going to kill you. They're all dead themselves. Pasuk Chaf, Moses took his wife and sons, mounted them on a donkey, and went back to the land of Egypt. I remember I said to you last week that it's not very clear from this sentence what the role of Moshe's wife was and his children. Did they come with him to Egypt or didn't they? Look at the Hebrew. Vayikach Moshe tishto vet banav, vayarkivem ala chamor. He took his wife and children, puts them onto a donkey. Doesn't say that they go with him. Then it just says, Vayashav arza Mitzrayim. He returned to the land of Egypt. Did they go with him or not? One always presumes that they did, but it's not clear that they did. Vayikach Moshe mateo lehim biyado, and he took the staff of God with him in his hand. The next pasuk 21, God says to Moses, when you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the marvels. Remember the snake and the leprosy that's on his arm. That was in the encounter with the burning bush. I put them in within your power. However, you should know you're going to be wasting your time. Why? In the Hebrew it says, Va'ani chazek et libo. I will harden, I will stiffen his heart. You have no chance of getting through to him, Moshe. You are wasting your time. However, you should go and do that which I've told you to do. V'lo yishalach et ha'am. He's not going to send forth the people. Continues the Pesukim, now we're at 22. V'amarta al Pharaoh, and you should say to Pharaoh, so says God, Israel is my firstborn son. A very interesting reference here to the firstborn son, Bechori Israel. What is the final of the makot, of the plagues that afflicted Egypt? The killing of the firstborn. In other words, I see the children of Israel, this emerging nation, Goy mikerev Goy, they're going to be plucked as a nation in their entirety from within, from amidst a nation. They are my firstborn child. Careful how you treat my firstborn child. And in the end, the punishment that Egypt gets is their firstborn children are torn away from them. Because that is the punishment for the slavery that they have forced God's firstborn child to endure. Chaf Gimel, I have said to you, let my son go, shalach et bani v'ya'avdeni, and he may worship me. Here the Jewish nation is referred to collectively as my son. They are my son, one person as it were, and they want to worship me. They want to pay homage to me, says God. Yet you refuse to let him go, not them, him go. Now I will slay your firstborn son. So we have here a microcosm of the entire narrative we're going to encounter in terms of the Exodus from Egypt. Even before we have the summary, we have a prediction here of everything that's going to happen in one sentence. Let my firstborn child go, or you will suffer the loss of your firstborn child. This is the trajectory that you are going down if you refuse to take care of my children who are under your thumb. Let's look at Chaf Daled, and this is the psukim which we have been looking at. Vayihiva derech b'malon, Moshe Rabbeinu, that's who we are talking about, was on his way, and in the malon, we usually translate as hotel, resting house. On the way, they had places where you could rest, etc. So he was on the way in the resting house. Vayifgeshehu Hashem vayevakesh hamito. He meets with God, and God wants to kill him. That's the way we normally translate it. Okay? Rashi doesn't say it that way. Rashi says that it was a Malach Hashem. It wasn't God himself. And we've seen last week that the killing may not have been him. May have been aimed at someone else. We're going to focus on that today as well. Vayifgeshehu Hashem, God met him. Vayevakesh hamiton, he wants to kill him. Okay? Vatikach tzipora tzor. Suddenly we reintroduce the daughter of Yitro, his wife Tzipora, and she takes a rock or stone, some type of flint stone, let's call it. Vatichrot et orlat bena, and she cut the orla, the foreskin of her son. Vatagala raglam, she touched it to his foot. Doesn't say whose foot, a little bit ambiguous. Vatomer ki chatan damim atali, you are my chatan damim, she says. Again, we don't know to who. Did she say it to the child, or did she say it to Moshe? Whose leg did she touch? What exactly is going on there? A little bit ambiguous. We're not quite sure. And finally, Vayiref mimenu az amra chatan damim lamulot. And when he let him alone, that's the way we translate it. So Moshe Rabbeinu is saved, it sounds, as a result of this act of Tzipora. When that happened, she said, a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision. Aimed at no one in particular, it seems she talks about this Chatan Damim again. Let's look. Last week we mentioned the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees talks about it in terms which are a little bit different than we generally understand from Chazal. I'm going to use that as a bit of a cipher to get into the next piece. The Book of Jubilees says that there's some evil spirit that comes and attacks Moshe. It's part of his challenge. Is he going to be able to withstand the challenge, which clearly is difficult for him? He doesn't naturally want to go on this mission. He's not interested in saving the Jewish nation. He's doing it under duress. How much duress will he take before he gives up? That's really what's going on here. That's how it sounds from the Book of Jubilees. It's not the way it's presented to us in Rashi, that's drawn from Chazal, but something is mentioned there that is echoed in Chazal, and that is that he was swallowed up, first from the feet to his waist, and then from his head to his waist, exposing the Makom Hamila, the place where one has the Brit Milah, the circumcision. And the implication is that it is an indication of what needs to be done to resolve things. And that's why Tzipora takes the tzor and does the Brit Milah on her son, because she clearly realizes this is the issue and I need to resolve it, and it seems to have resolved it. But what exactly that means is unclear, at least so far from the pieces that we've seen. We know that something happened. We know that his life was in grave danger. We're not yet sure why. And we're also not even sure that it was him. When we say him, whether that's Moshe Rabbeinu or someone else, one of his children, because suddenly his son is involved in a circumcision. Where did that come from? Let's look at the next piece of Chazal. It's a Mishnah in Nedarim. So as I've said many times before, and in so many different contexts, a Mishnah is really a condensed form of Chazal. What does that mean? That at some point in the 3rd century, Rabbi Judah the Prince, decided that the oral Torah was in danger of being forgotten. And despite the fact that it was delivered to us to remain a Torah that's not written down, we have a written Torah. It's called Tanakh. There's a canon, 24 books. That's the written version. And then we have a lot of material which is very relevant to that, helps us interpret it and understand it, but that has to remain in people's mouths. And the method by which it was studied was you'd have somebody who was a repeater in the Beit Midrash, would repeat these oral traditions, and that would generate a discussion. Sometimes it's in terms of explanation, narrative explanations. Sometimes it's halachic material. At some point, Rabbi decides that because of the Roman conquest, the destruction of the Second Temple, the Third Temple is not being rebuilt. We continue to remain in exile. The dispersion is perpetuating and getting more and more dispersed. We're going to forget everything. That which is written, but that which isn't written will be forgotten. How are we going to retain this knowledge? And he records it in the Mishnah. Midrashim as well, but mainly in the Mishnah. What is the Mishnah? Condensed material that is there as a platform in the same way as the repeater in the Beit Midrash would say something that would generate a discussion. Here we have now a formal text called a Mishnah, which generates a discussion about a certain topic. So the repeater now doesn't have to say it by heart, doesn't have to know it from someone else. He has a manuscript in front of him with a Mishnah, and that now generates the discussion. Now, the discussions that were generated eventually evolved into the Gemara, which we have. There was also many other recorded texts, but they're not part of the Mishnah. There's Baraita. A Baraita is a text that was also of the same subject matter, halachic material, but it wasn't included in the Mishnah. In the Gemara, sometimes they go through a Baraita and they decide this Baraita does not really have any truth to it. It doesn't make sense in the context of the Mishnah that we have. The Mishnah can't have been a mistake because that was very carefully edited. Therefore, the Baraita must be a mistake. Then we have Midrashic material. Midrashic material is really explaining the narratives of the Bible. Very occasionally, I'm talking about rarely, the Mishnah includes narrative material. Usually it's in relation to a halacha. So if the Mishnah wants to stress the importance or validity of a halacha, it will include narrative material from the oral Torah, which we would usually associate with the Midrash. Suddenly it's included in the Mishnah. The Gemara does it much more often, but the Mishnah does it very occasionally. Here we have one occasion. It's source number 5, Mishnayot Nedarim, chapter 3, Mishnah 11, Mishnah Yud Aleph. Rabbi Yossi says, so great is the mitzvah of circumcision that it overrules the strict prohibitions of Shabbat. That means if you have a baby on Shabbat, when does the Brit Milah need to happen if it is the 8th day? The following Shabbat, right? The 8th day is the following Shabbat. Now, what do we normally say about Shabbat? Are you allowed to perform a medical procedure on Shabbat if it's not a life-threatening situation? Of course not. You cannot. You have to schedule it either for Friday or for Sunday. You can't do it on Shabbat. Is the Brit Milah an elective or is it a necessity? It's an elective, right? We want to perform the Brit Milah. It's a mitzvah that we have to perform the Brit Milah. But suddenly we have the rules of Shabbat which come into play. So you would automatically assume it's an elective, therefore we push it off to Sunday because you can't break the rules of Shabbat for something which is an elective. Says the Mishnah, it is so important to perform the Brit Milah. Don't dismiss it and say, excuse me, Shabbat takes precedence. That doesn't make any sense. You must perform the Brit Milah on Shabbat. The rules of Shabbat are pushed to the side, and we perform the Brit Milah, we circumcise the child on Shabbat. Okay, that's what the Mishnah is telling us. Continues the Mishnah, a quotation from a Tana, from one of the rabbis of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha says, so great is the mitzvah of circumcision that Moshe HaTzadik, Moses the righteous, wasn't even given one moment to allow his son to remain uncircumcised. Our story, that Moshe Rabbeinu was very briefly concerned with his hotel, with the Malon, Baderech. He was on his way to Egypt, very briefly concerned with the aspects of whatever it was, which room he got. He wasn't happy with the room service, whatever it was. Even for that brief moment, that was sufficient for God to get angry with him and for them to need to perform the Brit to save his life. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha uses that as a proof of the paramount importance, the extreme importance of Brit Milah, to the extent, and to go back to what the Mishnah originally said, that a Brit Milah pushes away the rules of Shabbat. So Moshe Rabbeinu is used as a proof of that. Here he was, attempting to just go about his business on his way to Egypt. That's very reasonable. No one can complain that he's doing something wrong. It's not like he was running away. And yet, he's being treated in this way. His life is in danger. Why? Because Brit Milah is so important. Yes, of course, if you've got another mission, you need to save all the Jews in Egypt. You don't have to do the Brit Milah right now. But one second, you have enough time to check whether or not you got the right room. You're checking on your room service. You're not happy with the refrigerator in your room. You need, some other aspect of your creature comforts taken care of. You had time to do that. You should have done the Brit Milah, in which case you're going to be punished. Okay? Yeah.
Why does he bring his wife and kids with him? I mean, do you ever see other characters, like Abraham didn't bring Sarah?
So we're going to deal with that. We're going to address that. No, we only see that ever happen if they're a necessary part of the mission. And it doesn't appear that they are a necessary part of the mission.
Yeah,
but it doesn't really appear. We don't know for sure that he did bring them with. We don't know that he did bring them with.
I'm saying if the conflict is such a big thing like a Brit Milah, obviously she gave birth within 8 days of...
Well, I have a better question than that. Leave her at home and she can do the Brit Milah.
That's what I'm saying. Leave her home.
So,
he could do it and leave her home with the child.
With the child. So he seems to be fixated about taking her with. We're going to deal with that. We're going to address it. It's a little bit of an ambiguous subject because of the way the psukim are phrased. We don't know for sure that that's what the psukim mean, but assuming it means what you're saying it means, it's a very good question. Let's continue the Mishnah. Rabbi says, this is the author of the Mishnah, so great is circumcision that despite all the commandments that Abraham did, he was not called complete tamim until he was circumcised. And then the pasuk is quoted. In other words, you're never perfect as a person. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't perfect. Avraham Avinu wasn't perfect. Nobody was perfect until such time as they have performed a Brit. And that is why on Shabbat, if you have to perform a Brit, you don't concern yourself about the rules of Shabbat. You just perform the Brit, and that's what the most important thing is. So the reason I've quoted Rabbi doesn't seem to be directly relevant is because we have an alternative version of Rabbi brought in the Mechilta. The Mechilta is another form of Midrash. So the general narrative Midrash that we are familiar with is called Midrash Rabbah. So we have a Midrash Rabbah called Bereshit Rabbah. We have a Midrash Rabbah called Shemot Rabbah. That is the Midrash that deals with narrative portions of the text and expands on them. Gives us all kinds of traditions that relate to the narrative portions of the Torah. But beginning in Shemot, we have a number of halachic rules that are relevant to us. So we look at those because they give us expanded before the Mishnah, actually at the same time as the Mishnah, and before the Gemara, we have halachic material that relates to the text of the Torah that's brought in midrashic, as it were, midrashic sources. These are called midrashei halacha. The one on Shemot is called Mechilta. Okay, that's its name. There is a Mechilta relating to this same topic. Let's have a look what it says. I've got it here in Hebrew. Amar Moshe. What was going on here? Amar Moshe. What you're about to hear is such an astounding statement, you're not going to believe it. Okay? You're going to hear something in the Medrash now which will make no sense to you whatsoever. I'm going to precede it with a question. Was Moshe Rabbeinu a practicing Jew? Don't tell me that after he got the Torah he was a practicing Jew. I want to know, when he was 50 years old, was he a practicing Jew? What do we say about Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov? Were they practicing Jews? We do, right? And we have this famous midrash that says, Im Lavan Garti, I sojourned with my father-in-law Lavan. It's a message Yaakov sends to Esav. What does that mean? Ve'et taryag mitzvot shamarti. I observed 613 mitzvot. Whatever that means, we're not quite sure how he could observe 630 mitzvot in Lavan's house. But I'm not going to get detailed. I'm not going to get practical. But essentially, we understand to the extent that they knew what it meant to keep a mitzvah, the Avot kept mitzvot. What about Moshe Rabbeinu? He's the next great Jewish leader after Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and Yaakov's children. The next great Jewish figure is Moshe. Was he a practicing Jew like Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov? Listen to what the Medrash says. Amar Moshe, ha'il b'chol ha'olam ovdei avodah zara, ani avod lemi she'amar v'haya ha'olam. It seems he went through some type of faith crisis. And he said to himself, because the whole world is doing one thing, which is worshipping pagan idols, I'm going to worship God. He made an active choice. I can't be like the rest of the world. I'm not like them. I've got to be like myself. What's to be like myself? To be like myself is I'm going to worship God. So at some point, he made a proactive choice, not something he got from home, certainly not something he got from Pharaoh's palace. He knew he was Jewish by birth, but Jewish didn't mean religion. Jewish meant some type of family, tribal, national identity. It certainly didn't have any meaning or context in terms of observances. So we know that the three things that are associated with the Jews in Egypt is, the Midrash tells us elsewhere, they didn't change their names, they didn't change their clothes, and they didn't change their language. And we focus a lot of attention on that to show how consistent they were in their identity throughout the period of time that they lived in Egypt. Names, clothes, language. Doesn't say anything about Shabbat or Brit Milah, actually. Doesn't say anything about anything else. They managed to maintain their identities at a minimum level, three very important things, but that was it. Moshe Rabbeinu, if he's Jewish, in Midian, he's no longer in the center of action. He lives in Midian. He's managed to escape from Egypt, and now he lives in a far-off country. How is he Jewish? So you're going to think to yourself, okay, he knows about Shabbat from Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. He must observe Shabbat. No, he doesn't think about God. But at some point he thinks about God. Until that stage, the only way you can discern that he's Jewish is by his name. I'm assuming, by the way, that they didn't call him Moshe. Moshe is an Egyptian name. They called him Tovia. That was his name, Tovia. He had other names as well. Or Tov was his name. That was his Hebrew name. And he probably didn't change his clothing. And he didn't change his language. Whatever that means, however we're going to understand that, that was his identity. But now he has a faith crisis. Do I go along with my father-in-law, who is a Kohen Midian, who is the priest, the high priest of Midian, or do I worship my own God? And he decides there is a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The rest of the world can do whatever they like. I am making an active choice. I'm going to worship the God of Israel. That is a decision you couldn't presume that decision. That's a decision he proactively made. Says the Midrash, שבשעה שאמר משה ליתרו, תן לי ציפורה בתך לאישה. How do we know this, says the Midrash? Because there was a point at which Moshe Rabbeinu said to his his future father-in-law, Mr. Yisroi, would you mind if I married Tzipporah, your daughter? Amar lo Yitro. So Yitro replies to him and says as follows, Kabel olecha dovar zeh she'omar lecha. Accept upon yourself that which I am going to tell you. Va'anit notana lecha leisha, and I will give her to you as your wife. If you agree to my condition, you can marry her. What's the condition? Amar lo mahu. What is the condition that I have to fulfill in order to marry your daughter? Amar lo ben sheyeh lecha techila yiheh le'avodah zarah. The very first child you have, it's my first grandchild, that grandchild has to be a pagan offering. It's a firstborn child. That one has to be an avodah zarah child. Mikan ve'elach l'shem shamayim. After that, you can have it for your God. Whatever your God means. Don't forget, this stage Yitro is still Kohen Midian. He is the high priest of Midian. And he believes in pagan idols. He may also believe, by the way, in God, but he doesn't believe in the exclusivity of God. He's not a monotheist. He's a polytheist. He may include God in that polytheistic faith, whatever that's going to mean to him. He says to Moshe, your first child has to go to idol worship. Second one, do as you please. If you have more children, I guess, I don't know whether they would be one each. I don't know. He only had 2 boys. With Kabel Olav, and he accepted that condition. Amar lo. So he says to Moshe, Yitro says to him, Ishbi ali, swear it to me, make an oath. V'yishava lo, and he took the oath. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha Omer. You recognize that name from the Mishnah? Remember with the Mishnah, we have the quotation in the Mishnah in number 5, source number 5. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha says, Gedola mila shelo nitla leMoshe aleha malei sha'a. Lo nitna, not lo nitla. Lo nitna leMoshe, lo natna leMoshe aleha malei sha'a. He was in danger of being killed because of the fact that he hadn't performed a Brit Milah for his child. Even though that was the condition of him marrying Tzipporah, the moment he was out of the house and on his way to Egypt, he's no longer subject to the conditions of Yitro. At that stage, he can perform the Brit Milah on his second child. You still haven't done it? Right, your life is in danger because somehow your faith in God is deficient. If when you have the opportunity to do the thing that you weren't allowed to do, because it was conditional of you marrying Tzipporah, you had the opportunity, you didn't do it, right, you're in danger, you're going to die. Now we have Rabbi. Remember we had Rabbi in the Mishnah as well. Rabbi Judah, Rabbi Omer, Gedola milah shel zechuyotav shel Moshe lo amdu lo b'shat d'chako. You should know that milah is such an amazingly powerful mitzvah that Moshe Rabbeinu, despite his greatness, despite the fact that we anticipate that he is going to be the savior of the Jewish nation by leading them out of slavery from Egypt, doesn't matter. Brit Milah is more important, it trumps everything. And you haven't done a Brit Milah for your child, you're in danger. So what the rabbis here in the Midrash are, and we're really expanding on the Mishnah here, what they're drawing out of this is the supreme importance, the supremacy in terms of importance of the mitzvah of Brit Milah, of circumcision, to the extent that the great Moshe Rabbeinu is not irreplaceable. He'll be replaced, but because don't worry, the Jews are coming out of Egypt. And yes, we've heard that Moshe is going to be the one that takes them out, but you should know something. You better perform, because if you don't perform, you're out of the picture and we're going to find someone else. That's what happened. That's what the rabbis in the Mishnah are telling us. Brit Milah has supreme supremacy, if there's such an expression.
But why didn't he want to breed his first son that wasn't able to be, in other words, I would have breeded the 2-year-old too?
We don't know that how old the children were. Maybe they were 20.
So this was not an 8-day-old child?
What makes you think that?
No, it's hard to think that you would put a just birthed woman on a donkey with 2 other kids.
So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
But it makes sense now why he took them out.
No, it makes sense now why he didn't have a Brit Milah.
Well, it makes
because
sense
he'd made that the condition of getting. Okay, until he takes his children outside of Yitro's jurisdiction, he cannot give the Brit Milah because that was the condition of him marrying the man's daughter. But now he's no longer in the man's jurisdiction. He's finished. He's done. He's off. So why haven't you done it now? Oh, so there's a deficiency in your. Well, why? What opportunity are you waiting for? You left the house. You're on your way to Egypt. You're now stopping at a hotel. So do what you have to do. And if he has to wait a few days, he'll wait a few days. But why are you waiting? Why are you waiting? What excuse do you have? At least that's the... Listen, I don't know what actually happened. That's the way the rabbis of the Mishnah are interpreting it. And here in the Mechilta, we have an expansion of that story. Let's just continue. God says to Moshe, go and take my nation, my children, my son Israel out of Egypt. But because he delayed very briefly to do the Brit Milah at that moment when he was checking into the hotel, Bikesh HaMalach lehargo, the Malach of God wanted to kill him. What does that prove? The Brit Milah is more important than literally anything else. He was the one who was going to save the Jewish nation. Makes no difference. Brit Milah is more important. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. So we now have a third rabbi who continues in the same theme. Lo bikesh hamalach leharog et Moshe ela letinok. Now we have it here in writing. We have it here formally expressed. What does it mean? What does it mean vayevakesh lehargo? Okay, what did the pasuk say? The pasuk said vayevakesh hamito. And he wanted to kill him. Ambiguity, right? He wanted to kill him. Who was he? The malach. It's not God. Yes, it's a messenger, an emissary of God. By the way, it could be that same malach that's mentioned in Jubilees, who's a negative force. Like, as we're going to see in a minute, the Sar Shel Esav, who battled with Yaakov Avinu when he went back over Ma'avar Yabok. He went over the Yabok River, right? So we have this concept that an angel of God can be challenging. Vayevakesh hamito. What does that mean? He wants to kill Moshe? No, he wants to kill Moshe's son. Why? Because he doesn't have a Brit Milah. Continues the Midrash. How do we know that? Shenemar, he said it's hinted in the Pasuk. Ki chatan damim atali. You are my bridegroom of blood. Who is the bridegroom of blood here? Who are we referring to as the chatan damim? So we assume Moshe, because through the Brit Milah, you become my bridegroom of blood. Says, Rabbi Shimon Gamaliel says, Amrat, she said, Tse urei mi karui chatan. Who would be the one that's called chatan in this situation? Now, I'm not familiar with Hebrew at the time of the Mishnah or Hebrew at the time when this story occurred, but it seems that the word chatan in this context would not be applied to Moshe. It's more appropriately applied to someone who's just had the Brit Milah. They used to refer to someone who's just been circumcised as a chatan. In the same way as you refer to somebody under the chuppah as a chatan, you refer to somebody who's just had the Brit Milah as the chatan. Who is going to be chatan? Tinok or Moshe? Is it the child or is it Moshe? Havi Omer Tinok. We're talking about the child. That's the Mechilta. The Mechilta is a parallel text to the Mishnah, just an expanded form. Now let's see what the Gemara says. So the Gemara is the expansion of the text that occurs a couple of hundred years, or in the next couple of hundred years after the Mishnah was composed. And this is the Gemara on that Mishnah in Nedarim, which we were talking about.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if you read all this till Kaf Gimel,
Yes.
then you don't know that they're together.
I told you that.
Moshe and
It's
the
not
child.
clear that we're going to see there's a different opinion.
You could have like a scene 2 going on.
This could be various parallel stories. So we're trying to extract from here the version that makes the most sense. She could be in a totally different place, having this experience, and he's in a place where his life is threatened. But let's look what the Gemara says. So now the Gemara quotes Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was just in the Mechilta. Now we have the Gemara version, which appeared 200-300 years later. And this is the redacted version of the Gemara talking about the same subject in the name of the same man. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, it was not Moshe, our teacher, that the Satan wanted to kill. Remember what the Book of Jubilees said. The Book of Jubilees called him Mastema. Remember that we had this weird apparition angel called Mastema, which is mentioned many times in Jubilees. Here in the Gemara, written many years after Jubilees, the Gemara has now reverted back to the term that we are familiar with, Satan. Who's the Satan? Satan is a messenger from God who's there to thwart God's mission, God's plan. But he's there for a purpose. God wants him to be there. Like we have internally a Yetzer Hara, we have an inclination that draws us away from God, that gives meaning to mitzvot when we perform them, because there is a Yetzer Hara that militates against us performing them. So too, there's an external Yetzer Hara, which is a messenger from God there to militate against our performance of that which God wants us to do. It's going to be an important theme because it's going to come up again. Says the Gemara that Satan wanted to kill, but rather, in other words, he didn't want to kill Moshe, but rather that infant who was not circumcised. Who did the Satan want to kill? The child. Because it says, as we saw, surely a bridegroom of blood are you to me. Chatan lamulot, you are my chatan lamulot, you are my bridegroom of blood. That cannot be referring to Moshe, in which case the person whose life was in danger was never Moshe, it was the child. That's what Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion is. Now, Tzei Ulamad, the Gemara continues. Who is called the bridegroom in this instance? Who would we refer to as Chatan? You must say that this is the infant. Clearly we're talking about the child, we're not talking about Moshe. And now the Gemara continues. Rabbi Yehuda bar Bizna taught, at the time that Moshe, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, was negligent about the circumcision, and now he refers to other angels, not Satan. He says, Af and Chema, two angels. There's an angel called Af, which means anger, and there's another angel called Chema, which means wrath. They came and swallowed him, and only his legs were left. Immediately Tzipporah took a flint and cut off the foreskin of her son. Remember, we've mentioned this already. We've mentioned this from a few different places. There is a story here that something endangered his life, but his, in this version of the narrative, is not Moshe's life, it's the child's life. There was a serpent, or this Af and Chema, however they appeared, that swallowed up the child, leaving only the middle of his body exposed. Clearly we're talking about the Makom Hamilah, where he's going to be circumcised. So she took out a flint and cut off the foreskin of her son. And immediately, that we know the Pasuk says, Vayiref mimenu, he left him alone. The child was now in no danger whatsoever. It was at that moment that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to kill them, kill Af and Chema. He wanted to destroy these angels who are a danger to the future people of Israel. Why? Because the people of Israel are going to be commanded to do so many different things, including Brit Milah, and on every occasion, when they don't manage to perform that which they're meant to do, they're going to be in danger from Af and Chema. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, I don't want this danger to the people. I want them to be able to perform the mitzvot and do what they need to do. So he wanted to kill these angels. I don't know how you kill an angel. I'm sure that if I was directing a Hollywood movie, I'd be able to find some way to kill an angel which would make sense on screen. But here in the Midrash, in the Gemara, there is no indication as to how Moshe Rabbeinu intended to kill these two malachim, Af and Chema. And the Gemara goes on about it, and I don't want to go into that particular aspect of the Gemara. It's there if you want to read it. I just want to reiterate that there is a force trying to prevent Moshe Rabbeinu from doing that which he wants to do. Here it's directed against his child. Why? Because the child hasn't had its Brit Milah. By the way, for a legitimate reason. Moshe Rabbeinu wants to marry Tzipporah. And can I just say this? Is he really obligated to perform the Brit Milah? I mean, let's consider that for a moment. Has he got a commandment that he has to perform a Brit Milah? There's a covenant between the Jewish nation, not Jewish nation, the progenitors of the Jewish nation, Abraham, Yitzchak, that they have to perform this covenant if they want to be of the people of God, right? Abraham does it, Yitzchak does it. We presume Yaakov does it and his children as well. We don't know, by the way, we're not told. We presume that that's what happened. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't perform a Brit Milah to his son. So what's the consequence? What would you presume the consequence to be? That his son isn't included in the Brit, in the covenant. Whatever that covenant is, whatever that's going to mean for anyone who's in the covenant, won't apply to Moshe's son. Why? Because he didn't do a Brit Milah. It's not a capital offense. Do you understand what I'm saying? Moshe Rabbeinu's done something, but you can't really say he's done something wrong. He's just not done something which maybe he should do if he wants to include his son in the covenant. Suddenly it's being turned into something wrong. Moshe Rabbeinu now sees that when you are obligated to do something for God and you don't do it, there's all kinds of forces at play that can endanger your life. And he wants to prevent those forces from having any power. That's not fair. We want to do what we want to do. We didn't manage to do it immediately. Give us a fighting chance. That's what this Gemara is about. But really, there's a little bit of, there's a grey area here. Does Moshe Rabbeinu really need to perform a Brit Milah? Is that a necessity? Is that a requirement? Okay?
Well, Rabbi, we don't know so much about him in those 40 years that he was, after he left Egypt or before he returned.
60 years.
60 years? He was 100 or something?
No. He came back at the age of 80.
Oh, so
if he was for 40 years, he probably came back before he was 80, because we say that there were 40 years in the desert. So he came out of Egypt when he was 80. So he must have come back in that few months before. He was probably still in his late 70s.
So according to the life he was living, he didn't maybe need to. They weren't part of.
I said that earlier. I mean, but who's to say that when he had this revelation moment, maybe it only happened 5 years before? We don't know. Maybe he left at the age of 20 until the age of 75. He lived as like a Gentile. We don't know. We've got no evidence that he didn't. And it wouldn't be a criticism of him if he did. It is what it is. But the opening line of that Mechilta is remarkable. That Moshe Rabbeinu made a conscious decision that he wants to be a follower of God as opposed to a follower of pagan idols.
So then something was changing.
It sounds like that's what the Medrash is trying to tell us, that he made a conscious choice. And that before that, he hadn't made that choice. Let's continue. This is an ancient Midrash which is found in the Geniza. The Geniza, I mentioned it in my talk on Maimonides, was a room that was left in the Ben Ezra synagogue with all the papers that they'd stored there with any Hebrew writing on it. And at some point, hundreds of years ago, they locked the room and they lost the key. And there it remained, all this stuff, nobody needed the room. And at some stage, they opened the room. Maybe they wanted to refurbish the synagogue. And they discovered this treasure trove of manuscripts. And it was eventually obtained, or much of it was obtained by Solomon Schechter. He brought it to Cambridge, where it remains as a research resource. And it's on display. You can go and visit it and see. And in the context of Maimonides, the Rambam, you can see the writings of Maimonides in his own hand. But there's also many ancient midrashim there which we don't have. And they've discovered them and published them. This is one of them, an ancient midrash. Lama bikesh lechoneko. Why did the angel want to literally strangle him, okay, to suck the life out of him. Ela amar lo ha'elohim. God said to him, this is to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ani shelachticha shetelech v'tigael et banai shehem betzara. What did I do? What did God say to Moshe Rabbeinu? God said to him, Lech shuv Mitzrayim, go back to Egypt and save my people. And he gives him instructions, what he should say to Paro. And he doesn't do that. And God gets really cross with him. V'yashavta lecha b'malon. You're busy worrying about your hotel. You're busy with your creature comforts, with making sure you're in the right room. Really? I sent you to save my people. This is a mission where you shouldn't be concerned for your own comfort. You should be concerned with fulfilling the mission and discharging your duty. Lachen vayevakesh hamito. It's for that reason that God got angry with him. It's nothing to do with the Brit Milah. It's to do with the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was dawdling. The implication here is quite different. Moshe Rabbeinu is the reluctant Moshe of the encounter at the burning bush. He's in the same frame of mind. He said, yes, I'll do it, but he still didn't do it. He went back to his father-in-law and asked permission, but then he never went. God says to him, go. So he goes, but he's still not going quite as quickly as he should go. He should be going very fast. He should be running. He should be on the fastest horse and getting to Egypt immediately. But no, he's with his wife and children, and they're in a hotel, and he's concerned with a room service. That doesn't sound, to God, that means he's not really, his heart's not in it, and therefore, Vayevakesh Hamito, he wants to kill him. He thinks, you know what, I chose a dud. I thought Moshe Rabbeinu was the guy. He's not the guy. I'll find someone else. And therefore, he's going to be written out of the script. That's what happened here. Davar acher, Vayevakesh Hamito, he wanted to kill him. This is another explanation. Lama, why did he want to kill him? Shayabano arel, because he had an uncircumcised child. That's the one that we're familiar with. That's the story we've been talking about. Hamar Elohim, God said to him, Moshe olech lomar Yisrael sheyamulu. Moshe is going to go to the Jewish nation, the Hebrews in Egypt, the slaves, and he's going to say to them, he's going to say, you're Jews. What does it mean if we're Jewish? Did you have a Brit Milah yet? No, we never had a Brit Milah. What? You're descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you didn't have a Brit Milah? You got to have a Brit Milah. So that's one of the things that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to have to tell the Jewish nation. Says God. They're going to say to him, Banecha arelim va'at omer lanu limol. Your own children are uncircumcised, and you're telling us to circumcise ourselves? What a chutzpah. Who do you think you are? So God says, you are springing into this mission with a glaring inconsistency. You're going to be declared a hypocrite. That is inappropriate. And therefore God met up with him on the journey and wants to kill him. Why? Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shlachticha le'otzi et Yisrael miMitzrayim ve'ata machnis isha uvanea l'sham. Another thing that he says to him is, you want to bring your wife and children? Your wife and children are endangering the mission because they're going to be used as the example as to why Moshe Rabbeinu shouldn't be taken seriously, because you're telling us, be Jews, circumcise yourselves. You brought your wife and children with you. By the way, there's more there. Really? You bring your wife and children to a life-threatening mission? You know, D-Day, when the American forces and the British forces went across the English Channel to the Normandy beaches. Imagine all the soldiers would have said, hold on, I just want to bring my wife and children with me. Really? That's what you bring on a mission like that? No, you leave them at home, you go, and hopefully you're going to be successful. And if you're successful, you bring your wife and children afterwards. You're going to a life-threatening situation. You're going to be challenging the ruler of the most powerful nation on earth. And you're bringing your wife and children. It's not a vacation. You're busy with 5-star hotels. This is not a vacation. It's not a holiday. You're on a mission from God. And therefore, for that reason, and here we have it, Sharon, we begin to see another side to the story. He left his wife and children with Yitro. So now we're going to reread the pasuk, where it says, he took his wife and his children, he put them on a donkey. He was on the journey, and God was angry with him. So he put them on a donkey, and he sent them back home to Yitro. But things weren't right yet, okay? So he hadn't got it right yet. He hadn't finished with his problems. This Moshe Rabbeinu is a challenged individual. He's a man with a great destiny and with a powerful personality and with great potential, but he's not quite there yet. This is the struggle of the great man. Last week I spoke in Shul, I spoke about Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was 65 when he became the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He led the Allies to victory. Had it not been for Churchill, there wouldn't have been an opportunity to beat the Nazis in Europe, because the platform for the European invasion was Great Britain. It was because Churchill was so anti-Hitler that he was chosen as the Prime Minister. By the way, he was set up to fail. But if you look at Churchill's career, particularly in the few years before 1940, the man was a complete loser. He was disrespected, loved for his ability to speak, powerful speaker, but disrespected, thought to be a joke. His career was over. And yet, that greatness, that potential in him, which at the moment it was needed, was utilized, saw him at the age of 65 turn out to be one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century and certainly of modern history. That is the context I'm seeing here in the Midrash. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't show the greatest potential. This is a man who remonstrates with God even when he's encountering incredible prophetic moments. He's telling God, me, choose someone else, leave me out. Come on, I've got a nice life here with my wife and children. I'm not really the appropriate person. And maybe, by the way, he was right. Maybe he was. Maybe the fact that he's remonstrating with God proves it. He's not the right person. And in fact, he goes home. He doesn't immediately embark on the mission. He needs to be prompted again and given the script again. And even then, he dawdles and brings his wife and children with him. 1 second, Moshe Rabbeinu? Really? That's who I chose? It was a mistake, says God to himself. It wasn't the right choice. Ve'yevakesh lahamito, he wants to kill him. Is he going to be able to withstand this challenge? Will he be able to rise to the challenge of this mission that I've given him to deliver my nation out of slavery in Egypt? We see here the making of a great leader. Not that he was born a great leader. We see the making of a great leader. He becomes that leader through the challenges that he encounters on the way, which are only hinted to at in the text. And we need the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Mechilta and the Midrashim to give us the context to understand what really is going on.
But it goes back to the first introduction we have of him, when he's looking this way and that way. He's conflicted. Like when he kills the Mitzri, and he
But isn't that powerful for us? Do you know what it's telling us? You and I, we can be Moshe Rabbeinu. We could be Moshe Rabbeinu, because we're always telling ourselves, come on, really? You're asking me? There's better people than me. I'm not the best at this. I'm not the best at that. I've got so many distractions. There's no way I'm going to achieve this objective. Who am I? And we all tell ourselves that. There's greater people than us. My teacher in yeshiva used to say, there's only one thing two Jews can agree upon, and that's what the third one should be giving to charity. Right? What is it that we have? We always think what we have is never going to be good enough. Moshe Rabbeinu is no different. Moshe Rabbeinu, who delivers the Torah to the Jewish nation, who's referred to in our history as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher, the greatest leader of all time, is the man who's reluctant to be leader and fails at every step until he gets to the moment when he confronts Pharaoh. By the way, much later on, he declares, I'm depressed, I can't handle it, I'm not able to be this leader that you want me to be. This is in Parshat Bahalotcha. He talks about how he's a complete failure. What am I? Am I going to be like a mother nursing and giving milk to your child? I'm useless. And on more than one occasion, he says, I'm giving up. After the story of the Egel, he says, wipe me clean, wipe me out of your book. Erase me from your book. I'm useless. He feels challenged. He doesn't feel right. And yet he still shines. This is not a natural, charismatic leader. He was born at the age of 1. But you read these biographies, the Art Scroll biography of some great rabbi. They said at the age of 1, he already knew everything. At the age of 5, he was better than his grandfather. At the age of 12, he was the head of a yeshiva of 48,000 people. Really? That's meant to inspire me? It just depresses me. Right? What use is that? I'm going to read a book about someone at the age of 5 was so perfect. I know what I was like at 5. I was useless. What chance have I got? Moshe Rabbeinu, this is the Art Scroll biography. It doesn't sound anything like the one I'm reading, which is published in Brooklyn. If Art Scroll would publish a biography about Moshe Rabbeinu, they would say at the age of 5 he was perfect. That's what they were right. But that's not what it says in the Torah. The Torah says he failed at every step. And he's plagued with doubt. Plagued with, self-criticism. I'm useless. I'm not the one. And he proved it. He's not the one. He's dawdling on the way. He's bringing his wife and children. It's a vacation. I'm going into the hotel. I want to see what room I'm going to get. He's not giving a Brit Milah to his child. He's coming and he's exposing himself to accusations of hypocrisy. Hey, really, Moshe, wake up. I want to say one more thing, because we're coming to the end and there's so much that I've left out. But this is actually, you remember I said last week that I originally began to give this shir or to look into this topic because I saw a shir from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and his shir was based on an essay by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And first of all, I listened to Rabbi Jacobson's shir, which was on one particular parish, which I'm about to share with you. And I read Rabbi Sachs' essay on the same topic, and it's so powerful and so important, and it really goes to what I've just said. And if there's a takeaway message, if there's a take-home message from this double shir that I began last week, it's this Rashbam. So I've told you before that Rashi, he wrote a perush on the Chumash, and he based his perush on 2 basic concepts. First of all, that the average person reading the Torah, without the assistance of a commentary that helps him in difficult spots, is not going to be able to understand the text. That's number 1. Number 2, we have Torah Sheba'al Peh, that really augments the Torah and helps us gain a real understanding of the narratives that are contained in the Torah. And without that oral Torah, that Torah Sheba'al Peh, if you read the Torah, you're going to misconceive what's going on. So he wrote his Perush, it's excellent, but sometimes, according to his grandson, he drifted a little further into Midrash than he should have. And the truth is, Rashi. And he allowed himself latitude to include midrashim that actually draw us away from the plain meaning of the text. But because Rashi is so important to understanding the Torah, we study it anyway. So the Rashbam writes, in his introduction to Breshit, he says, I challenged my grandfather, and I said to him, excuse me, Zaidi, I don't know if he called him Zaidi, maybe. He said, that there's so much midrash that you've decreased the value of the meaning of the plain text. And Rashi agreed with him. That's what he writes, Rashbam. He says, you know what, you're absolutely right, and I regret it. I wish I had the time to write the Perush again. So the Rashbam, knowing that his grandfather didn't have the time, wrote a Perush on the Torah. And he wrote it in the style that he wanted his grandfather to have written his commentary, but had not had the time to do it, to rewrite it and re-edit it and reproduce it so that it would be according to his own rules. So the Rashbam wrote his commentary according to the rules that Rashi agreed with him should have applied to his own commentary. He writes as follows, a most remarkable insight into what's going on here. And he doesn't write it here. He writes it in Parshat Vayishlach, and I've mentioned it already earlier. I've hinted at it. Yaakov Avinu is returning from Lavan's house. We all know what happened there. He's there for 20 years. 14 of which are spent obtaining his wives, right? So he waits 7 years, gets Leah instead of Rachel, marries Leah, and he says to his father-in-law, excuse me, I want Rachel as well. That's who I was promised. No problem, work another 7 years. So a couple of weeks later, he marries Rachel and he's to work another 7 years. Works off the 7 years as the CEO of Lavan's company, and he makes him an absolute fortune. He's now, in the top 100 quoted companies of Haran, and he now says, okay, I'm finished. Can I now work for myself? He says, sure. And he goes through a whole process. And suddenly Yaakov Avinu's company is also one of the top 100 companies. And at the end of 6 years, he's made himself a fortune and he's returning now with his family to Eretz Israel. What's the danger that's going to occur by coming back to the land of Israel? He's been away for 34 years. What's the danger? His brother Esav. He believes his brother Esav wants to kill him. Perhaps even in his own mind, he thinks to himself, Esav is right. I did steal away his firstbornness, and I did steal away his brachot, and I tricked my father, and now he wants to kill me. He's got the right to kill me. He's in grave danger. And he says to God, Katonti mikol chasadim, I'm not worthy of any special effort on your part to save me, because you've done so many kind things to me. You married me off to Leah, to Rachel, to their maidservants. I've had 12 sons. I've had a daughter. You've done so much for me. I've got so much wealth. But what he does is he develops a strategy. Strategy is divide and conquer. He divides his camp into two, so that if Esav seizes upon one of them, the other one can run away. He also prays to God. He also sends bribery to Esav. So he's covered all his bases. I would say he's covered all his bases. He's tried diplomacy. I know I gave a shiur on this. Diplomacy. He tries to pray, and he tries to develop a battle strategy so that at least part of the group could survive a terrible war. But then he does the strangest thing. It's in the middle of the night. Everybody's safe in their place. Strategy is in place. He crosses over the Yabok River to collect a few jars and bits and pieces he left behind. Really? All the commentaries struggle with this. What are you doing? Why are you going over the river? I left some jugs behind. You think they don't have jugs in Canaan? You'll buy some new ones. You're a very wealthy man. No, I need them. It's so important. I need to get them. What happens? He gets across the river and he encounters some individual who tries to kill him. And there's a big fight, and we know the story. He changes his name to Yisrael from Yaakov because you struggled with God and with men, and you prevailed. Okay? You're a struggler, but you prevail. Ki saritaim Elokim v'im anashim v'tuchal. That's what the pasuk says. Says the Rashbam, who is this person fighting with Yaakov Avinu? Who is he? Where's he come from? Why is he fighting with him? Says the Rashbam, an amazing thing. He says, do you know when you are most vulnerable? When you're about to be your most successful. At your greatest moment, that is your moment of greatest vulnerability. Do you know why people fail? They don't fail because they're losers. They fail because they're winners. Because at that moment, that's when the self-doubt creeps in. That's when you tell yourself, I'll never be able to do it. It's never going to work. Even Yaakov Avinu, who knows that God has got his back, who's sent bribery to Esav, who's divided his camp, he's done everything. He's running away. He's running away. He doesn't want to do that which he needs to do. What happens the next day when he meets Esav? Was there any problem? No, they hug, they kiss, they schmooze, they go their separate ways. Nothing. The whole thing was a big storm in a teacup. He's running away. You know why he's running away? Because you're at your greatest danger when you are about to be your most successful. Yaakov Avinu is triumphantly returning to the land of Canaan, having seen off all his opponents, including Esav. 34 years later, this is one of the wealthiest people in the world with a beautiful family, coming back triumphantly to the land of his inheritance. And he's running away in the middle of the night, leaving his family behind. Look what the Rashbam says. Yaakov v'nitzla lefi shekadosh baruch hu ifticho v'hu haya voreach. Do you know why he was caught up in this fight? Because he let his guard down for a minute. He ran away. He didn't want to be this great person that God had promised him he would be. וכן מצינו בכל ההולכים בדרך שלא ברצון הקדוש או ממאנים ללכת שנענשו. Says the Rashbam, this is not the only occasion in the Torah when this happens. We see it happens on other occasions when people run away from their destiny and try and escape who they are, who try and escape their greatness, or try and delay the real moment of greatness. We see it in the Torah. Where do we see it? In Tanakh. B'Moshe. What happened here? Moshe is the greatest Jew alive. He's about to save the Jewish nation. Katav shalach na b'yad tishlach. God says to him, don't tell me someone else can do it. You are the one. You're the one who can deliver the nation from slavery. You are the person. You're the man. You are the greatest of your generation. You're going to be the one who is victorious against the might of Egypt. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? Vayicharaf Hashem b'Moshe. But at that point, God became angry with him because he was challenging him. He was saying, I can't speak. I'm not the right one. Use my brother. Use someone else. He says, no, it's you. And God was angry with him. ולפי הפשט, אף על פי שאמרו חכמים בכל מקום, חרון אף עושה רושם, וכאן מה רושם יש? And the terrible thing happened. Moshe Rabbeinu should have reacted to that by saying to himself, notwithstanding all my doubts, I'm the one God promised me. And he's so angry, it must mean it. What impression did this anger make on Moshe Rabbeinu? Says the... So there's one pshat here, says that he was meant to be the Kohen and Aaron was going to be the Levi, but the punishment was that he became the Levi and Aaron became the Kohen. So the perpetual leadership, the religious leadership, went to his brother instead of to him because of his reluctance. That was one thing that happened, one result, net result that occurred because of Moshe's refusal to accept his own role. But there was something else that happened. Says the Rashbam, Af lefi הפשט, לפי שהיה מתעצל ללכת, כתב ויהי בדרך במלון ויפגשהו. Says the Rashbam, an amazing thing. Why was Moshe dawdling? Why was he in the hotel worrying about his room service? Why was he traveling with his wife and children? He didn't want to accept the truth. Maybe I'm going to get there. I'm not going to be so successful. I don't want to be without my wife and children for, 5 years. And some of the other Meforshim I'm not reading now go into greater detail on this. I don't want to be there for 5 years, waiting for my wife and children until I manage to achieve the victory against Egypt. I'm taking them with me. What is that saying? When you take your wife and children with you on a mission like that, you're saying, I don't believe I can be successful. But God told you you're going to be successful. I don't believe it. Yaakov Avinu, God told him, I've got your back. I don't believe it. Vayavek ishimo. So suddenly he is vulnerable to attack. Moshe Rabbeinu is traveling to Egypt with his wife and children on a donkey. He could have gone on the fastest, speediest horse. No, he's going on a donkey. Why? I don't believe it. He goes into the hotel. He's busy with the hotel. Doesn't give his son a Brit Milah. I don't really believe in it. But what are you talking about? They're going to say to you, how can you not give your child a Brit Milah and demand it of us? Because I don't really believe it. I don't believe in myself. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. I don't believe in myself. And now the Rashbam comes up with the most fantastic proof, the third person in Tanakh, about whom this can be said. Jonah. What happened to Jonah? Jonah's told, go and tell the people of Nineveh, unless they do teshuvah, the city is going to be destroyed. Really? They're going to listen to me, little Jonah, the Jew boy from Jerusalem? Forget it, I'm not going. I'm not wasting my time. You go, you're the one, says God to him. No, I'm not going. Goes on a ship, ship's sinking. He goes into the water and the whale swallows him up. Whatever that means, I'm not going to go into that. The imagery is there. He puts his own life and other people's lives in danger because he doesn't believe in himself. He's so great, but he doesn't believe in himself. Says the Rashbam, if you want to really expose yourself to danger, don't believe in yourself. That's what's going on here. The great Moshe Rabbeinu is in a life-threatening situation because he doesn't believe in himself. He doesn't believe in his own greatness. He doesn't believe in his chances for success. Says the Rashbam, that is pshat. Maybe he's saying that's what my grandfather should have written. The Midrashim don't give you the context. I'm giving you the context here, which is God is angry as he was at the burning bush, and he's telling Moshe Rabbeinu, your life is in danger. Do you know why? Because you're not performing. Give your son the Brit Milah. Stop worrying. Stop bringing your wife and children with you. That's not what this is about. This is about you performing your task, your mission, and being the Moshe Rabbeinu I know that you can be. And I think that's a powerful message here in these brief moments that we have, these few psukim that we have between the encounter at the burning bush and the mission's beginning when he meets Aaron and he goes to Pharaoh's palace and begins the process of saying, let my people go. Make sure that you're there, you're on top of who you are and what your mission is, and that you perform your duty and your tasks properly so that you can take care of business, the business that I have given you, that I've told you is so important. We'll leave it here. There's much more to say on this topic, but next week we will address a different topic. Thank you.